aiming to support young people 16 to 25 around Oxfordshire who are falling through gaps in mental health services. So it might be they've just had CAMHS input, turned 18 and are no longer eligible, but don't quite meet adult criteria. So we're trying to kind of hold those young people, and we kind of provide one-to-one sessions, and these are kind of based on coping skills, solution focused therapies, cognitive behavioural techniques, that kind of thing.
Yeah, hi, I'm Catherine. So I also work with Nikki as part of the Mental Wealth Academy, but I am partnered with Response. So they are based in Littlemore, and they were primarily a mental health housing service, so providing housing opportunities for people suffering with mental health issues, and have now branched out to be part of the Mental Health Academy, so working with that 18 to 25-year-old gap, as especially with people transitioning out of CAMHS who don't quite hit the criteria for adult mental health services. It's finding that support which is accessible and free and easy to get hold of. It can be quite difficult sometimes, especially knowing where to reach out and where to get that support from. So that's where we're sort of trying to bridge that gap.
Can I just say a quick thing, that actually mental health might be a whole spectrum of issues, and actually the word mental health might put some people off, but it may be as little as having some exam pressures and stress, up to full, much greater difficulty. So there's a whole range of things that we might address.
Yeah, absolutely. We focus a lot on like basic well-being as well, things as kind of setting goals, coping with stress, which we're going to cover today, in particular for university stress, exam pressure, those kinds of things. So it's kind of mild to moderate mental health, but general well-being as well, when you kind of just need a bit of a support getting to where you want to be.
So as I have the presentation up on my laptop, I'm afraid I can't see you anymore. So if you could just audibly say when you want me to move the slides along, I'll do that.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, I think you can move it along. Okay, so basically this is a bit of an overview of what we're going to be covering today in this webinar, and we're going to be looking at basically mental health and especially the effect of COVID, because obviously it is a bit of a strange time, and I think it's important to recognise that, especially for students, if you are moving to university for the first time or moving back, that could be undergrad or masters, it is going to feel a bit weird. And especially sometimes not having that social support of seeing people face to face, it's about being able to find the tools and techniques to notice when you are feeling overwhelmed or when you do need that extra bit of support. So we'll be covering like the first signs of anxiety or low mood, which is kind of a general of a mix of like the physical symptoms and also maybe more like the emotional symptoms, and noticing how it can affect you, how to cope with that, how to cope with the stress. Noticing when you're feeling overwhelmed, especially with worrying about university or the stresses around that, and then in contrast to that, how to be mindful and kind of be in the present and making sure that you are connected and focusing on your well-being. We will also be talking about an introduction to mental health first aid, which will also be covering how to support someone who's having a panic attack, and kind of some top tips for being able to support them in the moment and what you can do to help them cope. And that can involve sort of taking a step back or being, quite involved with them and helping them to breathe. And we have mentioned at the start of the chat, so you are welcome to email us if you have some questions you want to ask, and we will get around to answering them in the Q&A part. And we will then talk about some signposting, so in Oxford with your university, so Brookes or UniOv, and also other mental health charities other than Mental Wealth Academy, so for example Oxfordshire Mind. Next slide, I think.
So the introduction aims for this webinar, we really wanted to kind of facilitate an awareness of students' mental health, and like Catherine said, how COVID's really impacted this. And hopefully with the chat facility, or you guys can turn on your videos and unmute yourself at the end when we have a Q&A. I think it'd be really nice for us to have a discussion. If people want to share their own experiences, challenges they've overcome, or things that they're struggling with at uni, or that kind of thing. And also just to mention that this is kind of like a safe, confidential environment. So anything you do want to disclose, it is confidential. And our emails are in the chat box if you want to do that anonymously. That's not a problem at all. If anybody feels that they're uncomfortable or needs to leave, then please do. That's absolutely fine. It's important that you're kind of like looking after yourselves throughout this. I want to introduce the basics of mental health first aid. I personally believe that it's just important as emergency first aid, as those of you who have experienced mental health in a negative form or struggled with mental health, you may know that it is a very physical thing when we're struggling. Like Catherine said as well, to signpost to other organisations and services and resources, primarily in Oxfordshire, but also beyond that as well. And like I said, if you do have any questions, please do email us or put something in the chat, and we'll try and answer as many of those questions as possible. So I think we will get started, if that's okay, Jake, if you want to go to the next slide. So on this slide here, we have some kind of lived experiences from students that have experienced the effects of lockdown already in its first week. Any of you guys that are students, I assume you'll probably be in week 2 of your kind of academic learning, and probably being back at uni. So you'll be aware of some of the changes that have been made and the impacts that kind of COVID has had on you. A couple of these quotes are from the Mental Health Academy service users. So, I'll let you kind of, week 5 at Brooks already. Wow. That's really, I didn't realize it was going to be that deep. So you'll know exactly what I mean then. It'd be really interesting to get your feedback on how it's been for you. But yeah, as you can see from some of these quotes, it's been super tough. And one of the young people that we've been working with has said that it's made them appreciate the small things, like being outdoors and interacting with people. But initially, they really struggle with stress, especially if, hypothetically one of your housemates has to self-isolate or becomes, test positive. That can...
I think you're breaking up a little bit there. We may have lost you.
Oh, sorry. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Perfect. So obviously, if you're in a house and you're a fresher and you're trying to engage with your new flatmates and COVID comes along, it's going to make it very difficult. So this young person was talking about making the decision to flip their mindset and focus on what they're grateful for and how they can kind of make the most of this time.
So I'm just going to be talking about some of the first signs that I think can be applied to a lot of people for the first signs of anxiety and low mood. And sometimes it does involve just taking a bit of a step back and tuning into your body and how your body is feeling physically and emotionally. So, for example, a lot of people will get heart palpitations, or you'll be sweating a lot more, and you can feel headaches a lot more intensely, and they'll be a lot more consistent. And especially if you're not used to having those physical symptoms, that would be, I guess, maybe a sign that you do need to stop and just take a bit of a breather. And I think a good way of thinking about that is sometimes by thinking when you're reading a book, and in books they have punctuation, or in any form of writing you have punctuation, and that's just to take a breath. And sometimes in life we do need to do that. We do need to just take a breath and focus and tune into your body. As well as sleep disruptions, if you're finding that you're sleeping too much or too little, or really struggling to get off, that can be definitely a sign of anxiety, especially with waking up in the night and struggling to get to sleep. Because if you are worrying, those worries can kind of overwhelm you and take over, especially if you're just trying to focus and get to sleep. It can be hard when you are feeling not quite yourself. Again, with eating habits changing, I think it's similar to sometimes sleep. You're either eating too much or too little, and that can also affect your motivation and how much energy you have. So I think definitely everything sort of plays a part together, and you can have a cycle of all those different signs affecting one another. And so it's definitely really good to notice those first initial signs so that you can do something before it does become overwhelming and affects you adversely. Next slide.
So here we're just going to talk about some coping strategies for stress. Having been a uni student myself, I know that deadlines can be extremely stressful. Add a bit of COVID-19 in there and I can imagine it's a lot worse. And obviously you might know that this can be extremely overwhelming and can result in procrastination. So 3 ways that we can manage stress is firstly by time management and organisation. I personally felt at uni having like a really basic routine timetable, a Monday to Friday, kind of 9 o'clock till 6 o'clock, really helped me factor in what was important to me. It enabled me to prioritise deadlines, factor in some, self-care, like going for a walk or communicating with friends, those kinds of things. And it also enabled me to kind of have structure when I was feeling, a bit sort of stressed or low. I think having something that you can gain positive reward from and that sense of achievement once you'd completed something on that timetable really benefited my low mood. Secondly, breathing techniques. We're going to talk about this later on when we talk about the mental health first aid and how to first aid a panic attack. But just to get us started, the main kind of one that I found useful is called 4-4-6. And that is where you inhale for 4, you hold for 4, and you exhale for 6 seconds. And just to do this for as many times as you need to kind of get your muscles relaxing. And then thirdly, taking downtime for yourself, putting your phone away for half an hour, reading, meditating, doing some exercise, whatever kind of makes you feel good. That's really, really important in terms of looking after your brain and making sure that you're productive. The mistake I made was by thinking if I cram it all in, it's going to be the most effective piece of work. But I actually found that, taking regular breaks made my work a lot more kind of better quality. I've just seen in the chat, routines can be constructive. Personal dashboards, that sounds great. Do I to do this? Diet, activity, sleep and hydration. Fantastic. I've never actually heard of a dashboard, so I'll look into that for sure. Awesome. If you want to go on to the next slide, Jake, that would be fab. Thank you.
Yeah, so then this is just, again, talking about noticing when you are feeling overwhelmed or if things are getting too much. It's, again, just tuning into your body and noticing when you need to take a break. So for a lot of people, that can come out with the annoying thing of skin breakouts. And I think that can sometimes be so frustrating when you are feeling overwhelmed and then you wake up the next day and you've got a spot which reminds you of the fact you're overwhelmed. So sometimes that can be a clear indicator that you do need to take a break and just stop. Again, like I mentioned in the previous slide, lack of energy and motivation, and especially when you do have deadlines, it can feel as though it's so overwhelming, all the work that you need to do. And especially when you are feeling overwhelmed, it can be hard to remember those time management skills. Feeling short-tempered, so especially when you do live with, a flat of 8 and you're kind of constantly around people, it can be difficult to not be sort of short-tempered with them or kind of snapping, just because you are feeling overwhelmed, you are feeling stressed, and that can come out as so intense, and so your body's just kind of constantly rigid, and then when someone talks to you, it can feel so overwhelming and you just need to say something quick. Again, changes in eating or sleeping habits, like I mentioned before. Headaches, definitely a lot of people feel headaches, and that can be so overwhelming as well because it's so physical, a headache. So even when you do try and go outside, it can, really hold you back if you are feeling physically tired from just having a headache. And then the last one is withdrawal from social situations. So you may notice that you're not spending as much time with your friends, or when people are inviting you to go out, which I know obviously is a little bit different at the moment. But even, if you're invited to a Zoom quiz and feeling as though you don't want to do it, that would definitely be an indicator. I think especially for me, that would be an indicator that I am feeling quite overwhelmed and I do need to take a break. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. And so then this is, I guess, similar to the dash thing that y'all have mentioned. It's kind of, you can imagine it as a bit of a pie chart and all the different pieces. It's kind of like a Trivial Pursuit little pie chart, and it's how to focus on your well-being. And I think this is a really good way of reminding you of what works and what simple steps you can do. Even if it is just a little one, it's doing it little and often to help with your well-being. So the first one is give, which can be something so simple. So, you know, if you bake something for someone in your flat or doing something nice for someone else, it's just giving your time or giving your energy, giving your attention to someone. That can even be just by checking in on someone and making sure that they're okay. You're giving them your time. The next one is keep learning. So that can be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to do with university. It could be, you know, reading a new book, finding out about a new author that you've always wanted to get into, watching a documentary, learning a new language. There's lots of different apps like Duolingo for learning a new language, which is so easy and just on your phone that you don't really need to think about it. It's just there. And it can just be a really quick way of remembering to do something for yourself like that. Being active as well. I think Jake mentioned that for him, as you can see the bike in his background, that cycling is really important for him. And yeah, I think for me personally, I find that it will take a lot of effort to get me to do exercise, but then when I've done it, I feel so much better because you feel like you've accomplished something by like going on a run. And I definitely would recommend the Couch to 5K. It starts off so slow. I think the first run is like 60 seconds and it just builds you up really gradually. So then I think it's over 9 weeks and you do then end up running 30 minutes and it feels like such an achievement. And then the fourth one is connect. So that's connecting with anyone really. It can be connecting with your family or friends. It can be connecting with, you know, the new area that you've moved to or new social groups. It can be connecting with yourself as well, which I think is important to remember too. And then probably following on from that with connecting with yourself and tuning into yourself is being mindful and taking notice. And again, that comes back to what I was saying before about punctuation and grammar, and that we do need to take a step back sometimes and do take a break. And I think for the take notice aspect of the 5 steps to wellbeing, the app Headspace is really good because again, it's really simple. I think, you know, the first few times you use it, it's only 3 minutes that you're sitting there, and to be fair, it does seem a bit strange the first time you meditate or do anything like that, and 3 minutes can last quite a while, but it gets much easier the more you do it, and focusing on the present and how you're feeling in that moment can really help with just your overall well-being and your mental health. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please.
Okay, so this is kind of going to be a whistle-stop tour on mental health first aid. So I did my mental health first aid training with Mental Health First Aid England. And one thing that I took from this that I found that I can use and remember easily is this algae theory. So I'm going to kind of like talk you guys through each point. This is something that you can use in most kind of mental health episodes or crisis. And then shortly after this slide, I'm going to go into a more specific first aid for if you feel someone's having a panic or anxiety attack. So the first thing is to approach the person. And to do this, we need to be proactive. We need to initiate conversation about how the person is feeling. We need to be mindful of space, obviously, especially during the kind of 2 meter social distancing times. But also generally, you know, some people might not want to have physical contact or even be within a close proximity to someone if they are having any kind of episode. So you do need to be mindful of this. Also to be mindful of the person's privacy and confidentiality. Ultimately, we want to build trust with the person who we're assisting. However, if you feel that their life is at risk or someone else is at harm, then obviously safeguarding comes into that. Secondly, we need to assess. So looking out for signs of panic or anxiety. I'm going to go into more detail about this, but you know, extreme fear or distress, irregular or really fast breathing, quite often disassociation. So they might say that they're not sure where they are, they might not speak at all, they might kind of be looking around, all those kinds of signs. Panic attacks usually last no longer than 10 minutes. So if it's anything longer than that, then obviously kind of call the emergency services. Thirdly, to assist. So first of all, I think the most important thing in my experience is to ask if they want help and to ask if they need some help. A mistake that is often made is to assume, and this can be kind of not very welcomed. Then to introduce yourself, be friendly, use your name so they know that who you are and to feel comfortable in your company. Thirdly, just check for any kind of medical alert bracelet or necklace. Symptoms of panic attacks can often mimic heart attacks, so please do check if the person is wearing any information, and if you see anything that gives you kind of an inkling that they might be having a heart attack, for example, instead, then obviously call 999. If it is a panic, stay calm, speak really clearly and really slowly, using short sentences as not to overwhelm the person. And I think the most important thing is not to belittle the experiences. Panic attacks are extremely frightening, and it's important that we validate that person's feelings, rather than I'm going to go into what to avoid saying. Secondly, listen and communicate non-judgmentally. So, like I said, try not to be critical, speak slowly, and don't fill any silences. It's very likely that if a person is sat in silence, they might be holding themselves, looking quite distressed. They're probably trying to calm themselves down with whatever self-help techniques they usually have if they've previously had a panic attack. So it's important that we try not to fill the silences too much. Don't guilt trip them, saying things like, it's, what are you doing this for? It's inconvenient, etc. And don't express any frustration with that person. The third one is to give support and information. So this is to treat the person with respect and dignity. Don't blame them. Have really realistic expectations of kind of like what you want them to overcome. Give them hope, and just kind of be there for them, and offer any practical help after the initial panic has diminished. Encourage professional help. So this could be any signposting. I'd recommend doing this after the initial panic has passed. It's likely that they're not going to listen to a phone number or a business or organisation if they're mid-panic, so do wait until the panic has passed and they're a little calmer to signpost to services, or just encourage them to see their GP. And finally, just don't pressure them into doing this. Finally, encourage other support. So, for example, family, friends, local support groups, and ask them what self-help techniques they can use if they've already had a panic attack, and maybe support them in exploring these. Next page, please, Jake. Thank you. So this is a more specific first aid for anxiety and panic attacks. So like I said previously, it is a distinct episode of high anxiety with fear and discomfort, which can develop really abruptly and usually has its peak within 10 minutes. So I've listed some symptoms here, some palpitations, heart palpitations, sweating, trembling, shaking, chest pain or discomfort, nausea, dizziness, feelings of being detached or from reality of self. So that's that disassociation. They might ask questions like, where are they? Those kinds of things, or not respond at all. Fear of losing control. Panic attacks do often feel like our bodies, we're not in control of our bodies. Numbness, chills, or hot flushes. Next slide, please, Jake. Thank you. How to assist. So like I said, kind of bearing in mind the things I said previously. So introduce yourself in a calm, kind of friendly manner. And more importantly, ask them if they need help and give it to them. If they've had panic attacks before, they might have their own kind of routine that they work with and don't want to be interfered with. So please do make sure that we're asking people. Reassure them that they're having a panic attack, and remind them that these frightening thoughts and feelings will eventually pass. The key thing is to be present and to be with them kind of during this panic. Encourage them to focus on something that's non-threatening. A really good grounding technique is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So tell me 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can touch, and 1 thing. So that kind of makes them feel like they're more in control and brings them back down into reality. This obviously needs to be not threatening. So another thing they could do is watch the time passing on their watch. And then another note is on slow breathing. So as I said earlier, the 4-4-6 is probably the easiest one I find to remember. So inhaling for 4, holding for 4 seconds, and exhaling for 6. And to do this for as long as it feels kind of that you're out of the panic. The next one is called box breath. Just a note on this, on our Mental Wealth Academy Instagram and Facebook channels, we've got a lot of practitioners that often video themselves doing breathing techniques. So if you're struggling with this, then please do kind of take a look at those. So box breath is quite simply where you follow a box thing with your finger. So you'll inhale for 4, exhale for 4, inhale for 4, exhale for 4, and keep doing that until it feels good. The next one is bumblebee breath. So this is where you take your thumbs and you put your thumbs on the hard part of your earlobe. So your arms are like this and your hands on your head. Then you inhale, and as you exhale, you make a bumblebee noise. And you usually do that around sort of 3 to 4 times. Feels really silly the first time you do it, but it does feel it's relaxing. It's like a muscle relaxer. So you can give that one a go. And then another example that I've used is called the big squeeze. So it's where you sit in a comfortable position and you tense all the muscles in your body as hard as you can for 10 seconds, and then you let go and breathe. Next slide, please, Jake. So has anybody got any questions so far? You can either unmute your mic or you can pop them in the chat. If not, I think Catherine had a question from someone, didn't you, if you want to?
Well, I was going to say, maybe we could sort of talk about our experiences of stress in university. Like Nikki, because we've both been there, done that, and sort of got through it. So, yeah, and it is, it is quite an intense experience, especially when you have come from your little bubble of, wherever you live, and then you kind of go into the big wide world. And especially for me, I went to an old girls' school, and I just lived with my mum. So then when I moved into a flat which had 4 boys, I was like, oh my God, where have they come from? So it is difficult, adjusting to new people as well. And I think that's to be expected. And it's sort of accepting that, it is going to feel really strange at first. And I think sometimes accepting that strangeness and accepting that it's going to be a bit of a journey can be really helpful. That's what I found anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that word acceptance is really important. I use that a lot in my one-to-one sessions with the young people that I support. A lot of the time, even speaking out about mental health and well-being is quite a daunting thing. And just to kind of accept that you're struggling, this could be, like Jake was saying earlier, the word mental health has got quite a lot of sort of intense connotations, but just recognizing and accepting that you're feeling a bit rubbish, and kind of taking those steps to make yourself feel good. I actually had a bit of a rocky university experience. I enrolled at Bournemouth University. So I finished my A-levels, took some time off, and then went to Bournemouth. I found that it was very much not what I'd expected. I was away from home for the first time. And I was quite low, and I didn't really know how to deal with it because I've always been quite a happy, positive person and a kind of solution focused mindset. So for me, accepting that I was struggling was a massive thing. And I think, I did actually end up leaving. And part of that journey, I think I was there for about 4 months, and I actually ended up going to Brookes and graduating from Brookes last year. But part of that kind of journey for my mental health and wellbeing was accepting that I was struggling. And stress was a massive part of that. I think, with deadlines is one thing, but also the stress of our own mental health. That was a big factor.
What did you think was the first signs for you that you felt as though you were a bit overwhelmed with everything and that it wasn't the right choice for you?
Mine was definitely the isolating behaviour. So as Catherine mentioned earlier, if you're kind of normally a quite social person, from my experience, I was binge watching Netflix for an unhealthy amount of hours a day. Very unhealthy. Had my mother calling me saying, are you you going to get outside anytime soon? It was no, it was really bad, and that was kind of my indicator that I needed to make some changes. I'd made some quite nice friends at university, and I was getting invited to social events, but my kind of go-to was to just stay in my room and watch Netflix, really, and that was kind of my safety behaviour. So with in cognitive behavioural therapy practice that we do in our one-to-one sessions, we try and highlight what those kind of vicious cycles are. So, for someone who might have anxiety or depression, getting into those vicious cycles are what we call maintenance cycles, and they sustain the problem. So my maintenance cycle was binge watching Netflix and avoiding friendships and socialization. And short term, I got that sense of relief, like, oh, thank God I don't need to go out. I can sit and watch my Netflix, and I had that short term satisfaction. That was my safe place. But long term, it was actually sustaining my unhappiness and my stress and my low mood. So that was kind of when I needed to break that point. And I did that by talking to family, talking to people that I trusted that I was struggling. I'd never actually tried breathing techniques at that point. I hadn't kind of discovered those yet, but I think if I were to go back and have my time again, I'd definitely employ the 4-4-6 one. And a note on that as well, I think that's really effective if you struggle to sleep, not just for anxiety and stress, but just if you need to relax yourself before sleep. 4-4-6 breathing technique has been quite effective with the people that I've been working with.
Nikki and Catherine, have you found that people might take substances or drink too much, or take some medicines and stuff that they wouldn't otherwise be required to do so? Do people get into a spiral of they'll take something to help them through the situation?
Absolutely. I think the culture of university is, a lot of it is centralised around drinking, especially Freshers Week. I don't know if you guys are freshers who are on the call today and have had that experience of partying 7 nights in a row and feeling quite exhausted by the end of it. But, alcohol is a massive part of that. And often, we drink because it's a social thing to do. It makes us feel more confident, but actually the next day it kind of can result in that really low mood, and it's a depressant at the end of the day. So again, it's that short-term relief, kind of long-term detrimental effect, I've found anyway. I don't know about you, Catherine.
Yeah, I think as well it's that social element, and it's hard to escape that peer pressure maybe when you have been a bit more shielded at school, especially you could have just turned 18 and gone to university a month later. Say you turned 18 in August, and then it's this whole world that you're experiencing, so you don't know what your limit is. But I think as well with sort of like maybe alcohol or like drinking too much, it can also come along with like eating too much and also spending too much, because you do get that student loan, and it's probably the most amount of money that the government's ever going to give you in one go. And it does feel like, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do with all this money? And I think definitely for me, sometimes my coping strategy was just buying things, especially when you're coming back from a lecture or when you're just on your laptop. Like it's just there, it's just a click away, it's so easy. But then I think, like Nikki was mentioning with like the maintenance cycles, like it feels good in the moment because you're sort of excited about getting something new, but then seeing that money come out of your bank account and then having to worry about that and that sort of a stress isn't the most effective way to cope.
Absolutely. Jake, out of interest, your Common Ground Cafe, do you kind of have conversations with some of your customers or the people that kind of visit around university life, or any stresses that kind of come up there?
Well, I generally don't work in the cafe. They refuse to train me as a barista. I said, not even like third backup when you're desperate. But I have, the thing is, what some people, yes, so we're a large space and people sit on their laptops, all day or for an extended period of time. So we have a relatively lower rate of sale than a usual cafe where you have to write your name on a cup and it's next. So we've got much more time to talk to people, make them feel welcome, have a chat, talk to our regulars, etc. So having that special experience or different experience is part of of what we do. And I know that obviously, notwithstanding that, we slightly arbitrarily decided that student mental health was going to be our thing, but actually people have come to talk to our baristas, and they do have challenges and issues that they're struggling with, even up to being suicidal, and some of our female baristas might, give them a hug, and sit them down, let them, sit quietly and have a chat with them. So it was actually the fact that mental health first aid training is £300 a person, and I was very keen to support our staff as to what should we actually do when we see somebody that's genuinely in need of some help, other than that we obviously act as a signposting place where people can find where they can get professional help, or otherwise just be a place where people can come and relax, come and be. You don't have to talk to anybody, but if you can, if you want to, and you're sitting, with other people, the rest of society, or other, other people like you, and just working somewhere a bit more social than in your, maybe feeling more lonely in your room. So yes, we don't tend to give people any advice because we're not professionals, but actually we do feel that we want to help them. So hence in part this webinar.
Mm-hmm. Great. Does anybody want to share like their own experiences, or maybe they have any questions about the mental health first aid? Like I said, it was very much a whistle-stop tour. So if anyone's got any questions, then please do say, or any knowledge that they want to contribute at all. If not, we'll go on to the next slide.
This might seem like a bit random, but one of my friends got into like a really tough place, and she struggled to communicate to her family about how she was feeling, and she was prone to going AWOL. So a way I found was actually asking her to use like a traffic light system for when she was feeling wobbly, so that you could almost like gauge. So each color represents a particular like feeling. So then I knew how to respond for that color.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I think that's where the communication comes in. And like, I think that's really good for not assuming. We sometimes are so quick to judge how somebody's feeling based on the way that they're presenting. But I think, yeah, I've never heard of that traffic light thing, so I'm going to steal that. Thank you.
One quick question from me, Jake again, is that obviously baristas have their own issues and challenges as well, and we've had more than one employee who's self-harmed and cut themselves. Could you maybe explain, at least for my benefit, something a bit more about why people do that?
Yeah, I mean, on a kind of professional level, the Mental Wealth Academy is mild to moderate mental health needs. So we don't usually work with people who are actively self-harming, but we've done a bit of training around this. And from my experience, it's a need for control. So if they've kind of had a period of their life that they feel that they haven't been in control of, or kind of, some people have described it as a good pain. So it's something that they can control. It's their thing. It's what makes them feel safe at the time. I don't know if you had any kind of development on that, Catherine.
I think for a lot of people that I've spoken to, it's a way of telling someone that you're hurting without telling them. So I guess similar to the way that I guess Dominic was saying with the traffic light system, because it's visual. So you don't have to be there, and if someone asks you, oh yeah, I'm fine, you have the marks and they'll be able to tell from that, okay, maybe they're not fine. And then they would ask more appropriate questions rather than just a general, how are you? Because even though it's good asking someone how they are, sometimes people just automatically say fine without actually thinking about it. And so I think that's what I found with self-harming, that it's a more visual way of explaining that you're not okay.
Definitely. And I think one thing that's really important for everyone to be aware of is that self-harm doesn't always include harming your body in terms of cutting or anything like that. It can be excessive drinking, excessive drug use, non kind of visible ways of harming. So I think that's important and those ones are a lot harder to kind of acknowledge, I guess, and to kind of get support with.
Can I quickly share another quick thing if we've got time? It's that people say following on this "how are you" question. So a lot of people say "how are you," and they mean your physical health. What is it? If you're not well, go home. Don't give it to us. Go and get better. And ultimately, I can't do anything about it if you're not feeling very well. But I once went on a training course where at the start of every day, everybody sat in a circle around a wood fire in silence until somebody felt ready to talk, and you'd say how you were feeling and what your plans were for the day, what you were going to achieve, whatever, or what you wanted to do. But mainly they were talking about where you were in your head. And that's actually really useful information, because if you are anxious or stressed or pressured, everybody else can know what to do to support you or steer clear of you or not say the wrong thing. So actually knowing where people are and asking them how are you and understanding where they are in their head is actually incredibly useful in the business environment or in the educational environment, because people can they could do something about that and know whether they need to be supportive in some way or not.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then maybe it's more of like an appropriate question to say to someone like, are you okay? Rather than how are you, because it's very sort of direct and someone can easily say, no, actually, I'm not okay. But then with how are you, it's more of like an automatic fine. So asking someone whether they're okay is kind of delving a bit more into how they are feeling, maybe more mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we move on to the next slide? There's just a couple more. So this is about the Mental Health Academy. So this is a service that Catherine and I work for. We've put a QR code on here. So if any of you guys are struggling with your mental health and well-being, or you know someone that is, you can just scan that barcode and it will take you straight to our referral form. So it's for 16 to 25-year-olds around Oxfordshire. And we offer 12 sessions, which are on a weekly basis, and these are around an hour. These are either over phone call or video call, whatever you prefer. And at SOFEA, we are doing some socially distanced face-to-face sessions, if that's kind of more appropriate for you. Like we were saying, it's mild to moderate support that we offer, and we try to tailor each session exactly to what the individual needs, whether that's CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy for anxiety, depression, low mood, stress, anger, or whether that's just setting some goals and kind of supporting you in reaching those, and to develop coping strategies, and trying to find out what works best for you. So like we've got down here, create a wellbeing routine, encouraging relaxation techniques like the breathing that we went through, and then the solution focused therapies. So yeah, if anybody kind of needs the support, then the QR code is there. You can refer. It's a free service. Yes, it's completely free, Rebecca. So you can self-refer. So if you just go to the Response Mental Wealth Academy website, there's an online form there, or you can get in touch with Catherine and I and refer yourself directly to us. The service, you can be referred by absolutely anyone. All you need is to complete the referral form, whether you go to the GP. There's a new service in Oxfordshire at the moment called social prescribing. And that's a service for signposting, really. So if you went to your doctor with kind of low-level anxiety, depression, stress, they might signpost you towards us, the Mental Health Academy. Catherine's just put the link in the bio for the referral. And the waiting times. There's 6 practitioners across Oxfordshire. So we've got 6 partners. So there's me at SOFEA, Catherine at Response. We've got Alice at Ark-T, Oxfordshire Mind, and BIP in Banbury. Who have I missed, Catherine? Oxfordshire Youth. So there's 6 of us around Oxfordshire.
Yeah, and so when you submit the referral form, which basically goes, the first page is just your information. So that's basically just your name, address, and your phone number and email address and how best to contact you. And then the next page goes on to talking about what support you're looking for in particular and maybe what support you've had in the past. And it then gets sent on to our sort of like manager. So he will get back in touch with you within 7 days. Our waiting times are quite short, and you should then hear back from one of us. So one of the 6 wellbeing practitioners will either ring you or email you, depending on your preference. And we can also send texts if you're not too keen on phone calls. Then we can be quite flexible. So it's just about sort of booking in that 1 hour call whenever works for you, and then kind of going from there.
Absolutely. I think on average, our kind of waiting time should be no longer than a couple of weeks. I've got a couple of spaces on mine. We can see up to 20 people at one time. So should be hopefully no longer than a couple of weeks generally. Awesome. And then do you want to go on to the next slide? So we've just got some signposting resources here. I'll let Catherine talk you through them.
Yeah, so this is possibly if you feel as though you want some more other support. So because, as Nikki mentioned, we deal with more low to moderate mental health needs. So that includes like low mood, anxiety, if you are experiencing panic attacks, low self-esteem, low confidence. We also deal with, helping you get a job if that's, sort of one of your goals. But as we kind of mentioned before, if you are self-harming or and more complex needs, sort of similar to self-harm, that would be for maybe a more complex mental health service. There are quite a few in Oxfordshire, which is really good, and I know in particular Talking Space, so they work similar to us, where you fill in an online referral form, and then I think it's within a week you will get a consultation call, and someone will talk to you for about half an hour and just see what is the most appropriate service for you. And there are also a number of websites that you can look at. So Young Minds is really good and has a lot of workbooks I found on university experiences and dealing with, some of the complications that arise from going to university possibly. Oxfordshire Mind is what I mentioned before. So they also run courses. So other than sort of one-to-one therapy sessions, they also do online and possibly face-to-face. I'm not sure whether they've moved on face-to-face yet, but courses dealing with anxiety, dealing with, controlling and staying on top of your emotions if you do have intense emotions. The NHS self-help workbooks, you can get these up on either your phone or on your laptop, and these are basically just workbooks that you can print or fill in on your computer, and they're kind of more like self-help orientated, so it's kind of introducing anxiety or introducing something similar to that, and then going through some coping techniques and getting you to try them out. And obviously it is just on a workbook, so there's no one there kind of telling you to do it, but it could be a good starting block for you to kind of get used to having that help and getting that support. And then there is also Oxfordshire Recovery College, and I have been on a few of their courses, so they have quite a range as well, similar to Oxfordshire Mind. So I went on one a couple of weeks ago, which is on understanding self-confidence, and it was face-to-face, which was actually so nice. And it was a really supportive environment because it is face-to-face. There was only a few of us there, so I think there was 6 of us all together. And it's really good. It's really open and, a caring environment, which I think is so important. And I also did one on sleep hygiene, which was virtual, which was also helpful. And it's just kind of getting that shared experience of how everyone deals with different mental health issues and how they cope, and it's kind of sharing our tools and our techniques and doing that in a comfortable environment where you do feel safe and you do feel like you can talk. So those are just a number of the different services that you can get in touch with, and you can just Google most of them and they should come up.
There's also support from Oxford Brookes University and Oxford University and your own college. I don't know if Tanya, Anne-Marie or Sean are on the call. If they are, they might want to chip in and say a little bit more. But anyway, so the both.
Oh, we've got Tanya. She's here.
Hello, I'm Tanya Wickham. I'm the student welfare manager at Brookes, and we are. Matt and I, a very small part of the sort of wellbeing provision that there is at Brookes. We actually work with students who are sort of in quite serious crisis. Other parts of our wellbeing service, we have a counselling service which offers up to 6 sessions of solution-focused counselling. We have a mentoring service for students with long-term mental health conditions. Our chaplaincy runs a lot of events which are really good in terms of socialising with other people, and most of them are virtual at the moment, but that's proving really useful. And then in the faculty, the student support coordinators are sort of first line of support for sort of anything either course related or pastoral related, and they can signpost on to other parts of the university if necessary. And what I always say to students is, please contact us before things get really bad, because then, if you can, for example, go, have some one-to-one sessions, either with Mental Wealth Academy or with ourselves, hopefully that will enable you to learn the techniques that you need in order to cope in difficult and unusual situations. So what I would say is, contact the wellbeing team as soon as you begin to feel maybe some of those physical signs that Nikki and Catherine were talking about, or you realise you're beginning to isolate yourself. Just contact us, and then we can either work with you or signpost you on. So thank you.
Absolutely. I think preventative intervention is so important. Mel, I'm the student support. Oh, fantastic. That's really useful. It sounds like you guys have got a lot support, which is fantastic. Just a second note on the resources. Any of you guys that are podcast fans, Fern Cotton has a really lovely podcast called Happy Place, and she gets kind of guests on, and they talk about their experiences of life, of COVID, mental health and wellbeing. And the other one is by a guy called Jay Shetty, and he talks about having purpose in terms of wellbeing. There's lots of other good podcasts, but those are 2 of my personal favourites.
Great. And not sure why it was in here, but Common Ground Social Space is just in the portfolio of services to support you. Common Ground's just a sort of quiet space. The picture you can see was when we were full, pre-COVID. Obviously now the tables and chairs and everything are much more socially distanced. But they're also Jericho Comedy was on every week. It's now gone online, but Jericho Comedies, they do comedy clubs amongst the top 6 in the country, twice won I think now. And they all of the funds of that go to Oxfordshire Mind, incidentally enough, and we'll be putting on yoga and stuff on soon again, hopefully. So I think we're coming to the end. If people have any final questions, perhaps they can again put them in the chat or email them if you want it to be anonymous. But also I think I understand quite a few people weren't able to join, perhaps for technical reasons, but we will try and put up this talk where people can find it. But obviously we're at the start of term for Oxford University, and I guess relatively near the beginning of term for Brookes. So I don't know if people feel that it would be useful or interesting to have another talk later on in the year, and we're looking for any suggestions from you as to what that might be on, or what we might cover, or what people might find useful. So again, any suggestions would be fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah. I think anyone that's like Mel, anyone that comes to you with, if you find any common themes that people are coming to you with, that feedback would be greatly appreciated. And if you don't want to mention it right now, you can email either myself or Catherine. This is the first Mental Health Academy webinar, so any feedback or kind of improvements for the next one would be appreciated.